Welcome to the Rise to Change podcast. I'm your host, Daniele Ascani.
And I'm your host, Marcela Torres-Noguera. We're mental health professionals with a private practice in New York City.
And guess what? We are not only partners in business, but also in life.
This podcast explores the everyday struggles of working professionals that we've seen throughout our combined 25 years of experience in our practice, as well as in our personal lives.
Our motto is to normalize, not minimize. And on today's episode, we are delighted to have here with us Mr. Michael Basta. Mr. Basta is a licensed clinical social worker with a successful private practice in Santa Rosa, located in Sonoma County, California. Mr. Basta has over 30 years of experience working with couples, and guess what? He was trained by John Gottman. Now, if you're not familiar with John Gottman or the Gottman Institute or Julie Gottman, we think you should be, because in our opinion, they are the most influential researchers when it comes to relationships and communication and couples in general. And communication is the reason why we're here today with Mr. Basta. We think that communication, or the lack of, is one of the main reasons why couples struggle and they seek therapy. And Mr. Basta is going to tell us a little bit about good communication, bad communication, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mr. Basta, welcome.
Delighted to be here.
Thank you. First of all, let's start off with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay. I'm not sure how far back you want me to go. I could say currently I'm a clinical social worker, as you said. I mainly see couples these days. I started out as a little kid in San Francisco, growing up in an Italian neighborhood, living above my father's bar. And I would say I chose the field of social work because I was inspired either to be a bartender like my dad and my uncle, or a priest. And my compromise was a social worker.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a good middle ground.
That's awesome. What made you get involved with the Gottman Institute?
Well, I had really worked most of my career working with children and families. And at the time that I took training from the Gottmans my colleague Marcia Gomez and I were working in a Kaiser Hospital psychiatric clinic, and I was running a program for suicidal teenagers, for teenagers in high crisis and distress. And our program was a family-based program. So we really believed if we involved the family, we could help the kids the most. And we had a multi-phasic program, but we really focused on family therapy a lot. And as a strategic family therapy, part of what I learned is that I wanted to have the right people in the room in that family. I wanted to figure out what conversations did we need to have and who needed to be there. So many times what I found is I was having the teenager actually leave the room, and I was keeping the parents in the room. And I was very interested then in working with these parents. And that drew both Marcia and I to then go to some training with the Gottmans. We were part of what they call the California rollout. So the Gottmans, at that point in the early 2000s, took their approach, and they did this rollout training to a number of us in California. So it kind of got started there.
Wow, when you mentioned the teenager or teenagers walking out, you brought back a lot of memories. Maybe more. That's for another. That's for a session. I'll save that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Basta, I mean, one of the things that we really wanted to talk about, which seems sort of like, people kind of like assume that they know what bad communication is or good communication is. But we want to hear from you. If you can tell our audience a little bit about, what does good communication look like? And can you give us some ideas so our audience can also learn a bit?
It's a good question, because I think that at least what I believe is that most people think about communication, and they may think about, on the one hand, it would be providing a very clear message. And so if somebody could do a good job, maybe, writing up a nice persuasive script and delivering this in a very eloquent way, we'd say that's great communication. And I would say maybe that might be part of it, but the part that is really important is then on the listening side. Am I maintaining my attention? And am I listening to take in what you're saying and really get to the heart of what you're saying? Or am I really only getting part of that, but formulating in my head ways I'm going to come back and counter what you're saying, right? Which is kind of what we're trained to do, to come up with a kind of a critical response, say. So I would say for communication to be really good, number one, we got to be present, not distracted, but present and taking in the information. And on the speaker side, and this gets into right away into one of the findings from John's research, is that it's not enough. It's not enough then just to have the listener be a really good listener. There are forms of therapy that really just work on the listening, but how that speaker delivers their message is really important. If that speaker delivers that message in a way that is very harsh, right, harsh and critical, or putting their partner down, that's predictive of that communication being really bad, and then bad things for that relationship.
So you're saying part of it is just being able to be present, and that's the first step. And the second one is around being able to take in what the person is saying and then give back something. I think, we often encounter in couples like, hey, I'm sharing this with you, but I may not necessarily want a solution, or it's kind of like I just want you to be able to listen to me and kind of like take that in. But it's hard because I think most of us have that idea that if somebody's sharing something with us, we have to, deliver and kind of like give some kind of solution or just, in giving our opinion. And depending on how we do that, we may, just start some things going that are not making our partner feel like we're really listening.
Yes. Yeah. I think that you hit on a very important point because, for many of us, and some people have generalized to say this is more of a guy thing, but I talk to plenty of women that would say the same kind of thing, that there's this feeling that if I don't give you some good advice, I'm really not doing my job. And
amen. That's wow. That's we're gonna put that on a loop so that we tell our audience. That's awesome. What you just said. That's awesome. Carry on. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Well, what I was going to say is then I think some of this then is the art of figuring out, and maybe you just got to ask. So do you want some advice here, or you want me just to listen? Right? Because
yes.
Right? Because these are different kind of conversations. Sometimes people really do want advice. I may not know what to do with a situation, and I may just be throwing my hands up. But I think probably more often than not, with most of us, what we find, whether we're aware of it or not, is we're wanting to just say some things. And as we're talking, we may be moving towards feeling better about a situation and maybe even coming up with our own solutions. So if we can have a partner that is there just to hear us out, reflect back what we're saying, or just say some things, or even just go, oh yeah, good, oh, no kidding, oh, that's horrible. Some things like that, that may just do it right there.
Yeah. And I was thinking about what you said about being present, that nowadays it's so hard for us to be present because sometimes, we're like, we get a message on the phone and then that which seems so simple as sort of like the first step already becomes sort of like an obstacle for a lot of couples that is like, okay, I really need to tell you this, but you're busy, or when can I say this to you, right? And that's another piece of, I guess, good communication, finding a time when, it's like a good time, or checking with our partner. Is it okay? Like, I have something that I want to share. Is it okay if we talk about it right now? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think that it's exactly right. And I think that we're all subject in this world to having this great technology. I mean, the technology that lets us have this meeting like this, it's incredible. And at the same time, we're subject to this mass distraction. I think in the morning, I think, oh, I have to stop and think. Do I reach over and hug my wife first, or do I grab my phone because I want to know what the weather is and what happened with the stock market?
Yes. Yes.
You can ask Alexa.
Yes.
Exactly.
And going a little bit more into, so you talked a little bit about, I mean, what good communication is, and therefore we started talking about what poor communication is. But if you can tell us a little more about poor communication, like what does that look like? Like, how do I know I'm not doing a very good job with my partner when they're trying to communicate something to us?
Well, so yeah, that dips us right into, I think the I won't say it's the biggest finding, but the most popular early finding that came out of John Gottman's research, and that was what he called calls the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So what he found in this research is that there are four behaviors that if you see coming up in a conversation are predictive not only of that conversation going bad, but in the long term are predictive of a relationship falling apart if that couple is in a pattern of having these behaviors come up frequently. And so these four things he called the four horsemen of the apocalypse, or like the foretellers of doom, for that couple, are number one, criticism. So what he means by that would be bringing up a problem that focuses on your partner being the embodiment of that problem. In other words, I am upset because I went out to my truck and there was no gas in it, and I was worried I was going to run out of gas on the way into the office. And so I turned to my wife and I say, once again, you're so thoughtless. You left me with an empty tank. Could you just, remember every once in a while, stop and get some gas. Don't leave me like this. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, I could have said that in a softer way. I could have said how frustrated I am. I could have said, I really need you to help me out with this, and please get gas. But instead, if I turn that into a statement of my partner's character flaws, then he would say that's criticism right there, right?
Attacking the character. Yep.
Attacking the character of your partner. The other one, he said, is defensiveness. And this is not a fancy like Freudian kind of theory. He's just saying, if you're in the conversation and you find yourself either listing all the ways that you're right, like a laundry list of these things, I'm an innocent victim. Here are the reasons why it's not my fault, or dipping into what we call righteous indignation and turning on your partner, and attacking them. You would say, well, that's another form of defensiveness. So he said, if you see that, all right, that's another one of these four horsemen. And then the third is actually statistically the most predictive of a relationship falling apart, and that communication and that conversation falling apart. And that's what he called contempt. Contempt is the emotion expressed like this, non-verbally. It looks like this. Where I curl up the left side of my face and I roll my eyes. I don't know if you guys ever seen that before.
No, never. No, absolutely never. It's a legend here in New York. It's a legend.
New York City, I know you don't have any of that.
We don't have that. Very close to Philadelphia, brotherly love, really.
So the expression of contempt, is a put down of your partner. So he would say, if what you're doing essentially is finding a way to rise above your partner and put your partner down, all right, that would be the number one predictor of a relationship falling apart, and the conversation in effect not going well in the short term. And then The fourth one is what he called stonewalling. So stonewalling is what happens when I start getting overwhelmed by this conversation. My body might start going into an alert mode, right? I might start to be physiologically activated to the point where I want to either attack or I want to leave this room. And what a stonewaller will do is just kind of turn away. I just avert my eyes. I may look down. I may cross my arms across my chest like this, but I disengage from the conversation even though I'm still there, right? I'm trying to contain myself essentially because I feel like my fight flight response is kicked in, right? So those are the four. We'd say if those are coming up frequently, then that's a problem. We got to take a look at things. In John's research, he found that sort of in the mid to low 90%, he could predict just by looking at a couple for 15 minutes having a conflict conversation. If those behaviors came up, he could predict that in 5 years, that couple would either be miserable staying together for some sort of external reason, or they would have broken up. In our fields, we can't predict many things in the 90 percentile, right?
Sure, absolutely. And I think this is the perfect segue into the next question, which is John Gottman also identifies certain principles that can pretty much help a couple nourish and maintain their connection and their relationship. I think he talked about love maps and fondness and admiration and all of that. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So in this research, initially they came up with 7 areas, and they said, and if you read the book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, it's based on that research. That was this original longitudinal study where they would have couples come back, every 4 years, and they would ask them a series of questions, and they would give them a physiological analysis and do this whole research on them. And what they found with those couples is that there's a group of couples that they said are master couples, right? These are the couples that, to define in their words what a master couple meant, it would be that this is a couple that's been together for a long time. They said 20 or more years. This is a couple where when you interview them separately and together, they're pretty much saying the same thing. They're saying, I would rather be with this person than anyone else. This is the person for me. Even though it might not be perfect, this is the person for me. And they also would notice that when one partner entered the room or the conversation, the other partner's heart would relax, not accelerate, right? That person felt comforted by their partner, right? And he said, that's a master couple. And they found these 7 characteristics of those couples, all right? And the first is, as Daniele, as you said, would be love maps, having good love maps. And what that means is just having a lot of brain space for your partner. That you could be woken up in the middle of the night and somebody could say, tell me Marcela's favorite color. And you could be like, it's this, right? What's her, or you could be like on a cruise, competing on the newlywed game or something. And they would say, oh, tell me about her most embarrassing moment. And you'd be able to say, oh, I think it's this, right? And then we'd take her out from some room where she's been hiding and she'd say, yeah, that's it. He's got it. Right? Yeah. That's having a good love map, right? And it leads to that sense of feeling known, which ends up being very important, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then he said the second thing is having good fondness and admiration. All right. Well, the other way of saying that would be to have a culture of appreciation in the relationship where we're saying things or doing things that show our partner, hey, I really care about you. All right. I'm not being, how would John Gottman say this? He said, not being the Swedish farmer that loved his wife so much he almost told her. right? That you want to be that you want to be the kind of person that is in this relationship expressing those feelings, not just keeping it in my head. Like, of course, I love how you cook. I have to tell you all the time about that. No, it's expressing that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it happens so often, and we see it a lot that couples just, it's like, well, I mean, she knows I like her cooking, but it's like just saying it and kind of like expressing that appreciation
Yeah.
is key, because we all need that, right? And it's like it's like an acknowledgement. It's just being appreciative of what the person is doing for us. But many times in the day to day, that gets a little lost. So that's so important that you're talking about that.
Yeah, exactly right. To give a practical example of this, I learned from my wife. We were with some friends and family, and everybody was talking and giving compliments and things. And afterwards, my wife said, I really wish you would have spoken up and said something in that group about me, because there's all this complimenting. I know I do some of that too, and I know that you like that, but I would have liked to have heard that. I said, oh, I didn't know that was important to you. Well, we've only been together 40 something years, but I didn't know
Wow.
it would be important to you that I say something out loud in front of the group. Okay, I will put that in the love.
Yes, yes, yes. So you said love maps, fondness and admiration.
Yeah. The other one is called turning towards. And what turning towards means is essentially either because there's what we call a bid from our partner, or your partner may directly or indirectly ask for something, turning towards that bid, trying to acknowledge and take care of that bid for something. Could be like something like the classic thing would be you're taking a hike and one partner says, hey, look at that bird. And I might be on my cell phone, texting with some friend of mine, and I stop texting and I go, oh yeah, nice bird, right? It might just be that, nice bird. Could be more enthusiastic. It could be I drop the phone in the creek and I go, oh my God, look at that bird. That reminds me, we should probably quit our jobs and go visit the Amazon. There's so many more birds.
That's me. That's me.
Is that right?
That's she keeps me grounded. Marcela keeps me on earth.
But what you're saying, the turning towards, is really responding to that attempt. Like, I'm kind of like telling you something. I want your attention. So turning towards means I give you that attention, and that's
Yeah.
that's turning towards.
That's turning towards. And it could be unbid. It could be, I know you love French toast. So that's in my head. I'm like, oh, okay, I know I'm going to make French toast this morning, right? And hey, look, there's the French toast, right? I'm turning toward you in this way, right? As opposed to, hey, look at that bird. And I keep texting, right?
Sure.
Or, hey, look at that bird. Look, I'm texting here, give me a second, this is important, right? Turning away or turning against. So what they found in the research is it's not startling. They found that kind of what you would predict, that couples that turn towards in a very high degree do very well, right? The ones that are not, they're not doing well. It's kind of what we would predict would be the case. But I would say a couple of more things about that I think are trickier. One is that we think then about these three things I just talked about as the basis for a good friendship, right? That to have a good love map, to have a strong fondness and admiration, to turn towards, that's like the definition of a strong friendship. And that seems to be the basis really of a strong love relationship, to have those components like that. That would be the one thing that's important to note. The other is that I'd want you to think about each act of turning towards or turning away or turning against as like a piece of emotional currency, if you will. And if you think about a couple sharing, like the two of you, you share an emotional bank account. And that bank account doesn't, the currency of it is not dollars and cents. The currency are these little units of turning towards or turning away. And then one way to then think about it further, and this is, I can only follow John and his mathematics so far, but this one I capture, is that he would say, if you look at a couple in a conflict conversation in our laboratory, a couple that's a master couple, when they're having that conflict conversation, a master couple has 5 positive behaviors to every 1 negative behavior. A master couple.
5 to 1.
So they're in conflict. They may be angry. They may be, their heart rates may be rising a little bit, but they're still doing things far more on the positive side than the negative side. They would be saying things like, "Okay, my bad. Tell me that again. Or let me try that again. Let me see if I can say it a different way." Or they'd be maintaining eye contact with each other. 5 to 1. Mm-hmm. If they were just hanging out, 20 to 1 positive to negative is what they would find. So if then we take this idea of the emotional bank account and those units of emotional currency, right, that come from the turning towards or the turning away, turning against, we could then theorize that, well, each time that I turn away, it's worth 5. It's worth 5 units of emotional currency. Each time I turn towards, it's worth 1. And so the theory here would be that's the economy of a relationship, right? That I got to keep a lot of positivity because negativity outweighs positivity in this formula. So I better keep a lot of positivity going. If I just put it in neutral, when I say I'm going to coast, you're just going to keep it low energy here, that relationship will eventually deteriorate over time, right? Because of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the emotional currency, especially, here in New York. That's resonates. That's great. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome.
So thinking about, you were talking a little bit more about conflict. Could you tell us a little bit about just some bits of wisdom for the couples in our audience about,
including us.
Yes, about, problem solving, conflict resolution, when we get to those places where, we're talking about difficult topics, finances, parenting, raising our children.
Chores, house chores, who's doing the dishes.
What? What do you think, could be helpful in terms of, for our audience to kind of think about, okay, what are some things that we can do when we face a conflict? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot involved in that, right? That's one of those 7 areas is how we deal with conflict. And I think one of the things that is important, and I wish I knew this way earlier in my relationship, I would have thought about it a lot differently. But it's that all conflicts are not equal, right? All conflicts are not equal. So if you look at the problems that couples have, the issues that they have, what John found in the research is that roughly 70% of the problems that any couple has are what we call perpetual. These are problems you're never going to fully solve. And it doesn't matter if this is a happy couple or a miserable couple, those numbers are about the same, right? You knock on the door of your neighbor and have them count up the problems that they have, and it seems like, okay, they're going to have about 70%, and they're arguing all the time. You go to the next neighbor, and they seem like they get along well. Well, they're the same thing. About 70% of the problems they face are ones that they're never going to fully solve. And the reason for that is that you're taking 2 personalities and putting them together. And in some ways they line up great, and in some ways they don't. And it's the mixture of those things that create these problems where if you're asking me to change, well, I'm wired a certain way and I can only bend so far, right? So this is kind of the state of affairs of a relationship. And you might say then, well, that's kind of a negative view of reality, right? We shouldn't think about it that way, except that seems to be reality. What John would say is he said, well, in this one classic study, we had the couple again come back every 4 years for 20 years, right? So they came back 5 times. He said, if we took the videotapes of them having not an argument, but a discussion of their last argument, and we took those videotapes and we spliced them together, what you would see is it'd be the same conversation, except the lines on their face would deepen, their hair would get a little more gray, and their clothes would change. But otherwise, he said, it's basically the same conversation for most of these couples like that, right? So, but then if you look at the group that are this master group, right? Not the group you said is a disaster group, or people are just miserable and they're breaking up. But this group that are still like, hey, we're really doing well together. They still have that 70% of their problems being perpetual. But those couples have found a way to accept each other in a different way. And they have found a way to be in a dialogue, which is not about saying, my life's work here is changing you into something else. Instead, they've found a way to keep talking about these issues, realizing that they're very different in these ways, but always coming up with little compromises that are temporary, right? It's not a final fix to the problem. So say, for example, and you could name any problem. If we said parenting, sex, the in-laws, money, like all of the classic problems that couples, might have, we could say, well, those could all be perpetual problems. How the couple talks to each other ends up being really important. That's that's the key. And if they're able to accept that they have this difference, and I'll give you one example, and then I will hand the floor over because I feel like I'm blathering on here a little bit. Sorry about that.
No, this is wisdom. Listen, I feel I'm back in college here. This is great. I assure you. Please carry on.
Yes.
Don't feel pressure.
Well, the classic would be like this. Here's one partner that is very introverted and doesn't really want to spend a lot of time with other people, but they meet somebody that really lights them up, and this person is very outgoing and social. And the one who's social says, I see all these people, they seem so superficial, but this guy, he seems really deep. I really I feel so different being around him. And that's how it starts. But then we get like 5 years down the line, and the introverted partner is saying, you have everybody in the neighborhood at the house all the time. I need some space. I can't handle this. Like, everybody's here all the time. I have nothing. And the other one's saying, look, I can't live in isolation, right? I need to be part of the community. And this is how I grew up. And I don't know what's going on with you, right? As we say, well, that couple could really get stuck like that, right? Mm-hmm. Right? That the very thing that pulled them together, or one of the very things, now is the thing that becomes this big problem, right? Where they're like this. And so the solution there is not to say, let's get in our heads more and let's use a rational problem solving approach. And let's say, well, okay, how can we come up with the best way of dividing up our time so this works for everybody? The solution is each one of them needs to be seen by their partner for who they are, warts and all, right? They need to be seen as like, this is part of who I am. And if you can have that, then I would say now there's a little platform where we can talk about okay, Saturday night you want to have your friends over. I can deal with that. Let's talk about a compromise for this week, right? Maybe the compromise is going to last a month and we're going to have to talk about it again because then I'm getting overwhelmed with that. But I feel so isolated. Okay, but can we talk? That's how a master couple does it, I would say. And the opposite is that couples will get gridlocked. They'll just get stuck in that kind of a problem like that, with that 70% type problem.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I think was so important when you said to make a distinction here between problems and perpetual problems, because there are certain things that always come up, and you know, there's no, it is what it is. They're called life, right?
Yeah.
That's. But I think it's important. I thank you for sharing that. We want to be respectful of your time. I think we have room for maybe 2 more questions or something.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we often hear from people that reach out to our practice, sometimes individuals may reach out and they may say, you know, I'm having a lot of issues with my partner, but, you know, they're not quite ready to start therapy. You know, what do I do? Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, what can a person do when their partner is not yet ready to kind of like delve into, you know, issues or just things that they're struggling with?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's a classic kind of a situation. I think as a couples therapist, I would say it is the minority of the time that both people come in with equal motivation into therapy, you know, on that end of it. And I think that I don't have every perfect answer to this, but I'll tell you what comes to mind is the first thing is for the partner that is aware there's something going on here, and I really think we need to change things up, is again, not to fall prey to criticism and contempt, right? To bring up the problem, owning it as something that is troubling to you. You know, that I'm finding myself being sad lately. I'm finding myself really worried. I'm finding myself confused. I need for us to have some different conversations. I need for us to try to do some things different here. Can we talk about that? Right? I think from the beginning to start like that. One of the things that becomes problematic is that if the problem comes up where one person is saying, in effect, I think I have my act together here, but if we just worked on you a little bit, then, you know, maybe we could move things forward. And I'm saying this for your own good.
Yes. It's also so different, you know, when you're saying it, and we talk with couples all the time. And one of the things that I think we kind of like don't think about so much, but it sounds, you know, when you said it, it reminded me of that, how talking from the I, right? Like from I, like, this is what's going on with me, and then sharing that with our partner instead of saying, you always do this or you never listen, right? And just starting just a conversation from there is so different. Like, it sounded so different when you said it from like an I perspective, right? And that's so hard for us to do sometimes. Like, you know, when it's just not the way sometimes we're used to talking, right?
No, absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So it does take slowing it down a little bit, and it also makes a person more vulnerable to say that, right? Because if I say that, I'm revealing more of myself, and then you could attack me, and I could, you know, then really feel like, okay, you know, I put myself out there and I got shot down, and that could hurt. So it's harder to do that, right? It's harder to do that. On the other hand, I think, getting back to your original question is, it will not, by using what we call a soft startup like that, it doesn't guarantee your partner is going to say, okay, this is great, let's buy all Gottman's books, or let's go into therapy now, you've really convinced me. That doesn't guarantee that, but it does up the probability that it's going to be a better conversation. I think that one is true. And then, you know, beyond that, I mean, not everybody is oriented to want to be in therapy. Some people have all kinds of feelings about it. Some people are not wanting to read books or any of these kind of things like that. But I think if you can start out hopefully earlier, not when things just are in a disaster place, and start talking about, well, what are some of the things, can we learn some things? Can we talk about some of these things? Yeah, that may prevent a lot.
I know that we may not necessarily have a panacea, a cure for all the troubles out there, the problems out there, but what do you think? Is there something, or is there a few things that the couples can do to maybe reconnect? I know it may sound like common sense, and I know geographically we may do things in New York that people may not do in California and vice versa. But what do you think? Is there something that you would recommend?
Yeah. Well, I think some of it is building rituals into your relationship that are important, right? And I would say, and I don't know if this is just a California thing, or I think it's probably not, but I think that there's a big value that people place on spontaneity, which is, which I like spontaneity as well. I think it could be just magical. To have things just come about and you think, wow, well, that was a wonderful moment. How could we possibly replicate that? But especially if you're living a busy life, if you have kids, if you have two careers, there's only so much time. And if you wait around for spontaneity to happen, the probability of that is low, right? And it may not be enough to sustain you. So I think for a couple to be thinking about, what are the ways that we come together that we can set up, that we can have, the classic thing would be like a date night, or to have a time at the end of the day where you can sit and reflect on the day. Even like it's like 15 minutes. Can we talk about what happened today? Or at a meal, right? To break bread together and say, this is an important thing as a family. I would say as a mental health professional, I deprived my family of being present for many meals because I was working evenings in a teen crisis program, right? There was a cost to that. But I think to sit and have a meal together, and in that meal, have a conversation about the day, talk about the highs and lows of the day for each person, something like that. So I would say, develop rituals. That could be very important. Things you can count on to come together.
And, very often we hear, couples may I don't know, watch TV while they're eating, for example. And it's sometimes how do we, even if you do that and that's an important ritual for the two of you, when is another moment when that might be, right? It might be a more possible thing for you to actually talk to each other and kind of check in. Hey, how was your day? Or, what's going on for you today?
Exactly.
Or Argentina won yesterday.
Argentina,
how are
yes.
you feeling about that?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, we also want to congratulate Argentina for
Go
their
Messi.
win. Yeah, go Messi. Yes. I mean, it was a good game though. My hat to France for putting up a fight till the end. Michael, one thing that again, we want to make sure that we're respectful of your time, and tell us a little bit about what you do out there. And we have people that are relocating either to California, some clients that are thinking about it. If they're struggling, everything, what can you do for them? How can they get in touch with you? Please tell us, how can people find you?
Okay. Thank you for that. At this point, I'm on the part of my career where I am slowing down. So I spend a lot of my time nowadays trying to hang out with my grandkids. I take care of my granddaughter one day a week, and I try to hook up and play a little soccer with my grandson whenever I can. But I do maintain a couples therapy practice, and at this point though, I am only taking on new couples for what's called marathon therapy. So this is a variation of Gottman method couples therapy. If you go to the website that my colleague Marcia and I share is SonomaCouplesWorkshops.com. You'll see a little bit about what we've done in the past. We used to offer couples workshops. I used to do more training of therapists in Gottman therapy that wanted to be certified in this method. Now you'll see on there, you'll say couples therapy, and it drop down, it'll say marathon therapy, and it would tell people about that. This is an intensive form of couples therapy, which is 3 days long. We just would see a couple for 3 days and follow-up sessions. And that's not for everyone, but for many couples, they find they can work through things in that type of format that they wouldn't be able to get to if they just came in every week or every 2 weeks, something like that. So I'm mainly
Sounds
doing
great.
that, and I'm mainly providing consultation to therapists that are wanting to train in this method. So I'm doing that through the Gottman Institute.
That's amazing. And do you do that virtually and in person?
I do. Yeah, I do. I prefer to see people now as we're getting a little bit into the post-pandemic stage. If people can come to the office for the marathon and then do follow-up online if they're coming from, a distance, that would be the preferable way to do it. But I am set up technically to do the marathon therapy online as well. Yeah.
I mean, this sounds terrific. I mean, especially, when couples, for the audience out there, couples can really combine two things, a trip to get away together and reconnect with that. And, 3 days sounds like, definitely it's a good thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They can come to the wine country.
Absolutely.
Here. Yeah, we'll show
Well,
all the good places.
I think we're done. I think we went actually over, but it was a pleasure, and I didn't want to interrupt you, Michael. And this has been like also a learning experience for us. I have to say you really provided a lot of
Yes.
wisdom, and I'm pretty sure that the audience will feel that way. It's been a pleasure. We'd love to see you again in the future. Maybe here in person if you travel to New York. That'd be great.
Oh, I would love it. My daughter used to work in the fashion industry in New York, and we would go out to see her. So we got to love New York City. So,
Oh, nice.
So,
Nice.
yeah.
That's wonderful.
I make excellent pizza from scratch. I make the
Okay,
dough myself.
okay.
Yes,
so
yes.
that's
that's a great invitation for me.
Good enough to consider taking another trip to New York. I assure you.
That's if you don't have enough reasons. Michael, it's been great. Thank you so much, and you have a wonderful rest of the day, and a happy holiday season, a wonderful New Year.
Thank you, and to you as well.
Thank you so much. And just for our audience, we will be including the website that Michael just talked about, and we will be including just some links for some resources. There's a video by John Gottman that it's very valuable, and it summarizes a lot of what we talked about today. And we'll include that book that you mentioned, The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work.
Very good. Excellent.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
Bye, Michael.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So just to wrap up, we just want to give some highlights from this conversation with Michael. This was so helpful. One of them is that the basis of a strong relationship and thinking about good communication, he gave us some ideas. So one of them is love maps, so making some brain space for our partner, expressing fondness and admiration, and turning towards as just predictors of good communication in our relationship. Then he spoke about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, so things that predict that our relationship is not going to go very well. Criticism is one of them, so focusing on character flaws in our partner, being defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling, basically not turning towards but turning the other way. One of the predictors of good communication definitely is being present. So just the idea that we should check with our partner if we need their attention. Is it a good time, right? Thinking about phones and, good moments when we want to share something. So if we really want to be present at the time we're trying to communicate something, just checking with our partner about that. He mentioned the idea of perpetual problems in relationships, just accepting that we're different and that there are always going to be some problems that are going to be perpetual in the sense that they will not, change drastically, like one of us being messy, the other one being more organized. But just he spoke about coming up with little compromises that could be temporary. So we're not really looking for like big solutions to some of these problems, but just kind of like compromising and trying different ways in which we can do our best to accept some of these differences between us in a couple. The other important part was building rituals into our relationship as something that can help us connect with each other. So whatever that looks like, he spoke about how valuable it is to be spontaneous, but sometimes we don't have the time, we can't be so spontaneous all the time when we're busy, and we know New Yorkers are pretty busy. So it's hard. So planning things like a date night, or just during meals, maybe no phones during meals, and it's a moment to catch up about the day, connect. If that's not a good moment, then finding moments for that to actually happen where we can, talk about what happened during the day, what's going on with you, how is this affecting you, something that's going on in the world or at work. I thought that was great. And then understanding that we not always have the same level of motivation in terms of feeling ready to have these conversations, even to reach out for help. So just being aware that, sometimes our partner may not quite be there, but just by us starting something, sometimes even starting individual therapy and then waiting to see if our partner may join at some point. Those are valuable highlights from our conversation with Michael today. We hope you enjoyed our podcast today, and we look forward to our next episode.
And happy holidays and Happy New Year to all of you.
This has been another episode of the Rise to Change podcast.
If you'd like to learn more, you can visit our website or find us on social media, which are linked in the description below, along with any resources we mentioned in this episode.
Thank you for listening, and remember to always be kind to yourself.